let's give a brief overview on the situation or the awareness of IP amongst businesses, especially the small and medium-sized enterprises. Based on your experience, are they aware of the situation of IP and the need to get IP valuation?
Thank you, Ibrahim. I think that the businesses, especially the SME sector in Malaysia, generally they are very well aware of IP, in fact now. Compared to 10 years ago, maybe it would be like an optional thing for them. They can register or not. But now, I think that most individuals, inventors, or businesses, if they have intellectual properties, they will take the necessary steps to protect them. This is what we have seen now, like we are seeing now. It is like they know that it is a necessity, not a luxury anymore. So the awareness is pretty okay, in my opinion, pretty good in Malaysia. Okay.
Maybe to Dr. Hafnizan, we can take the next question. We're looking at some of the key roles of Meranti in facilitating startups to commercialize their research. Of course, their research products offer supportive framework. What kind of IP valuation support does Meranti give in its innovation ecosystem for your partners?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moderator. So, as a Meranti, our mandate here is to bring the R&D from universities, from startup, or even from corporate into the commercializations. So, on our part, Meranti offer conducive IP consultation and services to our clients, and to look into how this R&D's product can be valued through the IPs. That's include in consultations, IP registrations, and also how we can bring this the IPs into the further funding facilitations or fundraisings.
Okay. Some of the companies here are thinking about growing their business organically. Maybe Sulin, you can talk about how IP valuation is critical, or perhaps can help with the M&A approach for companies when they want to grow inorganically.
Well, Malaysia is still very conservative in terms of IP valuations and even looking at IPs in general. And so when it comes to IPOs, IPs create a story for growth. You know, I have so-and-so, I have all these patents, I have all this technology, and it creates a very good growth story for companies going for listing. But in terms of mergers and acquisitions, the IPs don't come in until post-acquisition, where we will recognize it in the financial statements. You know, now you have this IP inside. But then IPs like this are also subject to impairment testing, which is why some companies are conservative when it comes to looking at giving them a potentially very high valuation.
Fantastic. Maybe we can talk to that effect as well for Nano. Malaysia, when it comes to valuing some of the research that you guys are doing and the kind of way that you can apply to these kind of ideas that we've spoken of the past few minutes.
Again, because we are the user in terms of the valuations, Nano Malaysia, we've been dealing with the IP beforehand, and then now we are also subscribing to the software. So, I mean, for us, as a Nano Malaysia, as a user, we've been using it because valuation is quite important to have. I mean, when talking about patent, you want to know what's the actual value. So far, before we come to valuation, usually we are looking at the cost approach, which is how much that we invested. So that's the amount that we think the value of the patent that we filed. But because we know that valuation is important, because we know the value of the technology is beyond that. That's why, hence, we are looking into the valuation to get the actual value through the market and income approach. I mean, using this software, at least we get the right amount or value of that particular technology.
I'm sure you'll be shopping around, not only be shopping around in terms of the tools that needs to be done when it comes to being a user. Do you feel that valuing IP is one of the easier ones or the cheapest one? What is the experience there?
Okay, so honestly, if you compare with, because of course we have numbers of IP agents, and value IP is one of it. Looking at the price, yes, it's, the charges is reasonable. Compare with the rest, because we know beforehand we already have the manual valuations that cost us 30 to 40,000 per valuation. We're talking about full-blown IP valuations. And then for Nano Malaysia, because we have two level of valuation. One we call as a preliminary IP valuation, which is this before we prove the projects. So we need to know actually whether it's worth for us to undertake this project, and then that we call as preliminary IP valuation. And after we complete the project, when we file for patent, then we do a full-blown valuation, which is this good for us in terms of our commercialization, as we know what will be the base of technology that we have.
Okay. So I guess now Hui-Ling can offer more discounts to Nano Malaysia.
Hope so.
Yes.
Yes.
We'll take that offline.
So Dr. Ardizan, what would be some of the further or add-on comments that you have when it comes to user and of course Outlook even?
Yeah, looking back myself as a user myself, because before this I was with the academic and we developing R&D, and of course the outcomes, that's the IP. So, and then after that I started up a company, startup and whatnot, and then be an M&A before I joined Meranti. So I have this experience from A to Z on the IP, on the R&D IP, and also the M&A, and also the business part. So yeah, one thing that first thing maybe important here is the awareness. The IP, the R&D people, the R&D, those who are doing research and developments know that it's important for them to protect their IPs, especially in Malaysia context. And then afterwards, they goes into the service for consultations. Once they know that this importance, then there's they have a needs of doing IP and how. So afterwards, this is where a company like valuing IP and whatnot can come into the pictures, offering the best offer to the clients, and that will be really good if this can bring into the next stage, for example, the M&A, acquisitions, or even fundraising.
Which is always interesting, right? The company, any company, it's not just about the R&D people. In fact, if you look at revenue, any company that spends more than 5% on R&D is already impressive, at least in my opinion. So you're talking about 95% of the revenue that's being shared by across all the members within the corporates that might not necessarily be aware of the necessity of IP. Maybe Sulin, you can pick this up, because not many people appreciate the idea of IP, its valuation, its utility in terms of corporate finance, M&A, from C-suite all the way to managers, and even rank and file. How do you envision the whole idea of IP and its valuation ideas to be enunciated and appreciated across the organization? Or at least the level of awareness, to be frank.
I think tech companies and pharmaceutical companies, and companies that do a lot of R&D, they do know the value of IP, and they do appreciate that there is a value to this research that I'm doing. But because we are in the environment where we are still limited to, the accounting standards and the needs of authorities and how you look at this thing that is currently intangible, to turn it into something that's tangible requires a lot of back work. Does it make money? Can you prove that it is monetizable? Can you actually bring this to market? And until the product can be brought to market, usually it is not recognizable in the financial statements. And so internally generated IPs is not recognized in the financial statements anywhere in the world today. But then until there is a merger and acquisition where you acquire the IP, then you see this thing recognized. But yes, IT companies definitely, any research companies do see value in these IPs.
Okay, let's talk to that effect as well, because I can't imagine valuing IPs. Clients are all tech companies and R&D companies. It comes in a whole set of form.
Yeah, I actually agree with Ms. Ding, right? Currently, when valuing IP, as we are promoting and raising the awareness of IP valuations in Malaysia, we found that we can solve the pain points of universities and research centers the most. Yeah, because we find that they need a way to solve their pain points where they may have a lot of projects in hand. And they need a way in order for them to make internal decisions more accurately. And it is very frustrating when one valuation report, if you do it the manual way, it will be we are talking about costs like ranging from 35,000 ringgit up to 100,000 ringgit, depending on the complexity. So if you have 10 projects in hand, that would be very costly in order for you to make internal decisions, right? And that's why we felt like there is really a need for software. We automate it. It's good enough, basic information, good enough for the team to make further analysis, to make further decisions on whether do you want to proceed with this project or not. Because ultimately, we want to commercialize it. We want to monetize it. And I think that is very relevant to Meranti as well, as a incubator, as a place where you promote and you want to empower the startups, right? Mostly technology companies, yeah. So I think, yes, it is relevant in some sectors right now. Maybe other sectors, they may not see the immediate impact and link right now. But I believe because the businesses right now are moving towards innovation, digitalization, technology, sooner or later, they will realize because the IP are their primary assets, sooner or later they will need IP valuation in order for them to do business decisions, business transactions. A very simple example would be licensing. If you would like to license out your rights, you will need some sort of IP valuation in order for you to know what's the value and you need a third party, non-biased, independent report in order to support the licensing fee that you're asking. Yeah.
Let's now move on to some of the challenges in IP valuation then, because throughout this morning, when I was having breakfast outside, it seems like those that attend today's program tend to have an idea of IP valuation, what needs to be done, but the need for us to overcome, first of all, identify the challenges, let alone overcome it, right? Maybe any of the speakers here can share the kind of challenges that is needed to overcome in valuing your own intellectual property. The user, perhaps.
All right. In terms of challenges, I mean, when we started with TIP, when it became manual those days, I think the challenges is to provide the data. I mean, talking about the projections, and then that sort of data. Sometimes when we work with our partners, the industry, they do not have that. They do not have the numbers or perhaps the data there. So with the limitation of the data, whenever we provide the information to the IP agent, I mean, talking about the IP last time, whenever they come up with the report will not be comprehensive, or the numbers, or perhaps the value will think, because of course we already have inside our head what will be the likely numbers of the value of the particular technology. Because before this, we are looking at cost approach, right? So more than less, you want the valuation to be more than cost approach, because you'll be thinking about the market. What will be the market like? It should be more than the cost that we invest. So that will be the main challenge, information. And then the second challenge will be the pricey, I mean, the budget, the constraint that we are facing, because we are not talking about one valuations, we are talking about the numbers of valuation. At one time, we have at least 10 valuation. So can you imagine 35,000 times 10, that the amount that we invested for valuation? I think that's the challenge as a user.
Any other challenges?
Yeah, on the Meranti side, the most challenging part is we want to validate the product or the IP before we can say that this is deemed for the market, for what the demand in the markets. So on Meranti side, our responsibility is to do the tech assessments, do the technology assessments on top of the IP that they have provided to us. So this is just to echo what Mr. 𝙑𝙧 informed just now. On our side is to carry on about the IP and to make sure that is value enough. So as mentioned by Mr. 𝙑𝙧, we have at least 3 approach: cost approach, income approach, or also market approach. So how can we able to say that this product is valuable enough for the next stage, which is on the commercializations, licensing, and whatnot. So the value, we need to state the baseline and how this is more challenging part on our side.
𝙑𝙧, maybe you can share with us some of the challenges that your clients are facing and the ability for you to overcome these kind of challenges on top of what they have mentioned earlier.
Well, I think most of them, when it comes to IP valuation, they have their own purpose of doing IP valuation. Some of them, it is because they want to go for listing. Some is because they want to find out what is the probable range for licensing. Some, they want to make internal decisions whether to further on with the commercialization phase. So I think the challenges for them would be to, when they engage us, usually they will have some difficulties when it comes to providing the information that we need in order to do a proper valuation, right? So financial data aside, they also need to probably provide us with, say, some of the IPs related documents. And we will take time, our team will take time back and forth to assess and to ask for more information. So what I'm trying to get here is that it is very time consuming. It's very time consuming. And not to mention costly, like what you have just mentioned in Malaysia, right? And all this problem, we find that it actually can be solved, it can be resolved by automating it to a certain extent. And when we talk about automating it, I would like to probably add on a little bit. So some people, they will think, are you sure your software is able to do that? Are you sure your software is able to do what you have been doing manually, right? So, and I often offer this analogy to them. So say 20 years ago, if I told you that there is a health diagnosis system, a software that could tell you what kind of diseases that you have by just answering a few questions, you will say, nah, I don't think so. Right? Because you think that you will need a very experienced, not just a doctor, but a very experienced doctor in order for you for him to diagnose what kind of illness you have. But someone has to start somewhere. And along the way, we find ways to shorten or to reduce the assumptions and limitations, right? So let's say we started off and right now we have a list of assumptions and limitations. So all the answers that we are giving you right now is based on certain assumptions. Our goal is always to shorten this list of assumptions and limitations as time goes by. And I believe that is achievable because like today, if we say healthcare, now you can even take a phone, snap a picture of your skin, for example, and it can tell you if you have skin cancer or not. That intelligent, right? So I believe we are at the very beginning phase of IP valuation software. And we definitely can enhance and make it smarter. And we can revolutionize the entire way of doing IP valuation, definitely.
May I add one point in terms of challenge? I think when it comes to one of the main challenges is time consuming. When we have these manuals of evaluation, usually will taken us at least 1 to 2 months for completion because you need to back and forth in terms of correspondences if you're not agree with the numbers. So you're going to provide more numbers. So I think time consuming. And then as for us non-Malaysia, I think time is an essence for everyone, I believe. So with the software that we have tried, I think the turnaround is about 2 weeks. Well done. It helped us in terms of in terms of making the decision. At the same time, we think that with the software that we're using, at least we know that there is a measurement. They are using, for example, IVS, IVSC, and IFR, International Financial Report. So at least that measurement help us, at least guide us in terms of the report that we receive. Just to add on in terms of time. Thank you.
A key idea for having this event is, of course, trying to explore what next for the IP valuation services. This question is for you, Sulin, because the national IP policy that was introduced by the government in July 2007 is trying to look at how they can further utilize IP valuation services into the realm of IP financing, IP marketplace, IP insurance, IP everything. Do you feel that the time for that is now, that we can now start to explore all these other ideas, including IP financing and IP marketplace, considering the IP valuation services is already keen, and folks like Valuing IP is doing that now?
I think that Malaysia is currently at the beginning stages of looking at this IP as an asset. You know, in other countries they have IP insurance, IP financing, you know, but I think that we are still very new. So companies like Valuing IP are looking to expand the knowledge, hoping to create more awareness around this topic. But yes, that is something definitely Malaysia will be heading towards as we grow into more of a technology country instead of agriculture. You know, that is definitely something that we will have to look into. Companies will be growing towards that direction of intangibles. You know, so it's definitely something that's important.
You want to add on to this?
I totally agree with Madam Sulin's mention about that. And just to add on, Mosti have produced what they call as Dasar IP Negara since 1978, and it has been renewed over the times, and the recent one is 2010, if I'm not mistaken. So I guess most of the valuing companies' IP services can refer to this, because the biggest markets on the IP productions is from universities and research institutes.
Yeah.
They have having problems how to bring the IP they have produced, whether they put it on the shelf as the IP, as the paper, or to bring it on the commercializations. So I guess this pretty much one of the things that maybe we can overlook on this.
Does Nano Malaysia, for instance, is looking at IP financing?
Of course, Nano Malaysia, we've been talking about to make it IP as a collateral. I mean, that will be the utopia of what we want to do. I mean, talking about commercialization, but at the same time, it's good because most of our partners or perhaps entrepreneurs outside there, the issue is always talking about financial. So we've been talking about IP as a collateral, meaning at least they can use this IP, they can be used as a collateral instead of tangible, but looking at intangible assets.
Or even worse, your EPF, right? So.
But that's the thing. I mean, looking at Malaysia, just to conquer to Miss Ding just now, I think we at least we are heading somewhere in terms of financial. We'll be talking to the banks, although of course banks in Malaysia, they are still having problem to accept the idea IP as collateral. But I mean, I believe because the other countries are already doing it. I mean, you talk about UK, Japan, even Singapore to an extent. They have China actually. China, the way they enforce, I mean, the government can enforce the bank, the local bank, to make IP, to allow that to allow intangible asset to loan them using the intangible asset. They did it at this point of, I mean, as we speak now. But for Malaysia, I guess in terms of the ecosystem, I think we are supporting that ecosystem.
Yes, definitely.
Yes, I just want to add, when Mr. 𝙑𝙧 mentioned about utopia, my ambitions here, I was dreaming of the next 10 years or the next few years, we can sell our IP like we sell our house. Okay?
Awesome.
So
That's
this
the pipeline.
this is something like that. It's a property. After all,
Yes,
it's a property.
it is.
It's a property. So it's pretty much the issue here is intangible property. Banks or all these finance institutions doesn't value intangible IP. But if we have a platform like what we have right now, maybe this is like a starting point for us to see that, oh, I have an idea, I want to develop something, and then I go for IP, and then I can sell it. I can be a millionaire or whatever. So it's pretty much easier than flipping the economy of the property or whatnot. So this is my crazy thought.
Back in 2010, I was part of the exploration team in terms of trying to build some sort of a security package for banks to use IP as a collateral, use it as a security, and buy and sell, trade them in the open market. And it was so bizarre then But now speaking to you guys, it becomes a little bit more clear.
Normalized.
Good to hear.
I mean, like, and that was 2010. I was thinking, when was I in that team? I think 2010.
Then come to Meranti, please.
Yeah. All right. I'm actually there. I'm already there. Astro's already at Meranti. Final statements before we move on IP financing, Sulin, before we move on to the closing statements. Go ahead.
I was going to say, all these IP got a lot more traction in the last 2 years because of the lockdowns. And then
Oh, yeah?
suddenly crypto came in, and then there's NFCs. Technically, NFC is a type of IP.
Oh, okay. There you go. I didn't know that. Okay, let's move on to the closing statements. Maybe Dr. Afnizan.
Okay, as mentioned, as the one that have experience from academia, doing R&D, establishing producing the IPs and then commercialize it. And now I'm with the agencies. I looking into IP, like I mentioned, it's a property. Okay, we need to elevate our mindset, our awareness that our ideas are way invaluable if we can do the right way. So I hope my ambitions on selling the idea in the form of IP as a tangible asset would be realized for the next few years, inshallah.
Thank you very much, Sulin.
I think the statement, doing it the right way is the way to go. So, I mean, companies need to look at this, but then also look at the risk factors that come with the IP valuations. And then, to know that we're still in an environment where we are limited in many ways. So, yeah.
Hairul, before we give to Puli.
Okay. Again, like Nano Malaysia, of course, we are looking at IP as our fundamental as it is our main focal in the company itself. We are developing IP. So far, we have 56 patents. And then in terms of valuation, I think it play the role in terms of value creation. I mean, for example, when you know the actual value using the approach that normally that you are looking at income and market and other approaches as well, then you already know what will be your strength. Because now Nano Malaysia not just look into tangible but intangible asset in terms of valuation. So we create that value. So in the way, also misting, because we already have that conversation about putting the valuation to the balance sheet. So because we put the valuation, our patent valuation to the balance sheet. So meaning when you look at it, it is in our P&L. So it creates that value. So Nano Malaysia value, in which I'm not going to disclose it now, but of course it carried that value creation. So when we created that, it helped us. It gives a confidence for the investor and also give a confidence for our partners that we have a strong company here. And then we are nanotechnology. Our main mandate is to become the global lead in terms of nanotechnology commercialization. Thank you.
All right, Puli.
I think I would like to send a message to say that for IP, for intellectual properties, we have laws in place, we have the policies in place, and we have very passionate players like ourselves and other IP firms in Malaysia and regionally. So I think there are a lot more key stakeholders here. We're talking about financial institutions, we're talking about policymakers. I wish they could come together, think about how are there other ways for us to move forward to this IP financing. We need a framework. We need to all sit together, come up with a framework, a workable one. Maybe financial institutions, if they are very conservative, of course, right? But if there is a framework for them to figure out, if the guy didn't pay up, what do we do with the IPs, right? Then we have a marketplace. How do you dispose them? How do you, if now your bank let along your house if you cannot pay up, what about IPs? There need to be a proper framework so that they can actually look into it. Is it even possible to use IP as collateral? I take your IP, I give you money, you grow your business with it, but what if you can't pay up? What's going to happen to the IP? Okay, so the bank owns the IP, but what's next? What do I do with them? So I think there really is a need for key stakeholders to come together, sit together, come up with a framework, make it work. It can, but the risk, we need to really look into that. Yes.
Fantastic. What a way to end. Thank you very much. Round of applause for my panel this afternoon.
Thank you.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our program for today. Thank you very much for staying all the way here.